I think you could still have a big market approach to doing things in a smaller community.
I can't wrap my head around everything that you do.
I like the adrenaline rush that directing gives you.
That's a quarter of a century, everybody.
Band's called Twisted Chrome.
Nobody talks to you about that in journalism school, do they?
I don't think so.
An inside look at the people in front of and behind the cameras at NTV on this episode of Inside NTV.
Welcome to another week's edition of Inside NTV, the podcast where we get to know the folks on camera and off camera at your favorite local news station. But this week, we're going to go into the vault and find a former NTVer and get to know them a little bit better. And you probably know this guy pretty well, but we're going to see if we can find out anything new and look back at his time at NTV. ESPN's Matt Schick joins me now. And Matt, thank you very much for taking a few minutes of your time this week.
Yeah, Christian, it's great to be with you, and good to always be back and be seen in central Nebraska. Always have fond memories.
You have a footprint, really, in the entire state of Nebraska. You have the Schick and Nick podcast still that you do with the Omaha crowd, but really stretches across the state. And so you're at ESPN. I want to talk about that a little bit, but you haven't forgotten your time in the Cornhusker State, that's for sure.
No, it's really home. It really is. I was born in Rochester, New York, lived in Maryland for a little bit, moved to Colorado right before my senior year of high school, and went to the University of Colorado for 4 years. But then right after that, I did something I never thought I would do, which is live in Nebraska. You know, when you're a CU guy, it's can't wear red, anti-Nebraska, it's no good. And then I got a job in Nebraska, and eventually it just becomes home. You meet people, eventually got married in Nebraska. And so it's, I always look forward to going back, and hope to get back there pretty soon this summer. But yeah, I love it there. And it's certainly a second home to us.
And when you do come back, if you come through Xtel, give us a holler. We'll get you on.
Yes. Yeah. I remember when we were back there, probably a couple of years ago, we stopped by at the station and got my family up on set, and it was like I'd never left. It was awesome to sit there with the gang.
We are having a set redo right now. There's a lot of construction going on over there, so we'll have a whole new, brand new look for when you.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, that's I don't know. I'm gonna need a keepsake or something from the old set. You got to give me something. I don't know what I want, but just hold something from the sports bureau or the sports wall or.
I've got a
something
piece of the wall of the set. I don't know if this helps.
Yes. That's incredible. That's incredible. Like piece by piece, brick by brick, take it apart, send it my way. Let's go.
There you go. So you're at ESPN. Before that, you were at KTV. Before that, at NTV. Tell us just a little bit. You're busy with college baseball recently with ESPN, but just refresh people's minds about what you're doing right now.
Yeah, it's studio hosting, play-by-play. My job changed over the last 10 years. We had some layoffs, and so I went from hosting a studio TV show, typically 4 days a week, whether it was college football, college basketball, whatever the season was. I was predominantly a studio host with maybe a couple of play-by-play gigs during the year, and then that role changed, and ESPNU shuttered there in Charlotte, where I live. And so it became more of play-by-play with a splash of studio hosting. I was in Bristol, Connecticut for 3 consecutive weekends doing the super regional hosting for softball, and then the selection show for baseball, and then the NCAA baseball regionals, doing squeeze play, and then the next weekend doing super regionals. So it was 3 straight weekends there, but then I might not get back to Bristol again till maybe the fall for another show or two. So it went from the job changed a lot, but host a lot of ESPN radio as well. During the football season, I'll do College Game Day on Saturdays with Trevor Maddich and company, and we'll do that for anywhere from 3 to 7 hours on a Saturday, just watching all the games. And I get to do that from my house, which is pretty cool too. It's I get to hook up and watch 7 or 8 games at my house and host a national radio program there as well. So it's hosting, play-by-play, some radio, and kind of the jack of all, master of none type of role.
It's got to be a lot of work for sure, a lot of heavy lifting in there. But man, that's a fun gig if you get to do sports, talk sports, do play-by-play, and you get to spend a pretty decent amount of time with your family. It sounds like if you're working from home that much.
Yeah, one of my biggest concerns with doing this job is that I was concerned when I started doing sportscasting that my big job on the weekends would be watching, or during the week would be watching other parents' kids play and not my own. And that was a big drawback to it. It's like, man, I want to do sports and I want to cover this stuff, but most of these things happen at night and most of them happen on the weekend, and that's when my kids eventually, when I have kids, when they grow up, will take part in it. But I was able to, there were a lot of doors that were opened up, and I'm able to not travel so much and stay home and work from home. And I do Sirius XM Monday through Friday on the Big Ten channel, channel 372, for 3 hours every morning. So I'm working every day. But I would say most of the time I'm here. I'll go in to do play-by-play instead of going to game sites. 8 out of 10 times I'll be right down the street in the studio, about 15 minutes away, calling games from the studio, which is good because it's a short commute home. It's bad because you're not there at the event, but we make it work, and you get used to it. So yeah, it's been a great work-life balance.
Nice, very good. So let's now go back to your NTV days. You were sports director here. Tell us in broad strokes, and then we'll get into specifics. Tell us about your time here at NTV.
Gosh, I started fresh out of school. I got a job at the sports radio station in Denver, Colorado, and I was doing sports updates. And it was a great gig, loved it. And then after a couple of months of doing that, I remember my father telling me, "Hey, have you looked for TV jobs recently?" It was almost like a reminder of, "Oh my goodness, I haven't been on tvjobs.com." That's when the website we used to use when I was out of school. So I looked, and there was a job opening in Kearney, and within probably 2 months, I was working there, and got a lot of rejection letters around the country, from different small markets, and you keep those letters and stay motivated if you need that. But got the job and was thrust right into, the first thing I did on the set, one of my first days, was anchoring post-game, pre-game coverage from the set of Nebraska's Rose Bowl game against Miami. And they said, "Hey, we want you to wear this Nebraska pin. Everyone's wearing a Husker pin." And I had just graduated 3 months ago from Colorado, but it pays the bills. So I put on the Nebraska pin and hosted the show, and it didn't go well for Nebraska, which was fine by me, right? I still was bleeding the black and gold of Colorado. But then I got to cover the local teams. I remember my first interview was with the Tri-City Storm head coach at the time. I was covering the Nebraska Kearney Lopers, Hastings College, local high schools. And so, frankly, being the weekend sports anchor and weekday sports reporter, you're carrying a camera all the time, everywhere you go. And these aren't like the new digital ones that are nice and small or compact or light. These are huge things that, you can get a rotator cuff or an AC joint injury pretty easy. Make you sign a waiver before you take the job. But we would typically on a Saturday, I would, heading into that Saturday, I would know who's playing or read the Kearney Hub and see which games are going on. And my day, even though I would get to the office till 1, my day would start at like 9 a.m., 10 a.m., go and hit some local high school wrestling meets or whatever was going on, a UNK track meet, get back to the office, edit, put your show together, write it, produce it, everything. So NTV taught me to do every part of my job. And frankly, now at ESPN, I do a fraction of that. Like I do one role. I'm the host and I'll produce a little bit, but I did everything back then. And it was really rewarding stuff. It was your show. There was oversight, but they trusted you to do what you wanted to do. And it was a lot of writing, write your jokes, write your lead-ins, write whatever you want to do, and then do your highlights. So I was doing that Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. Monday and Tuesday, I'd be sports reporting. So Jeff Russo, who's now in Buffalo and has been for a long time, he was the sports director at the time. So we'd talk about different stories, and I would produce a story a day, go out to local high schools or whatever the local flavor was, do a story, produce that for his sportscast. Be done around 10:30 at night, go home, come back, do it again. My off days were Wednesday, Thursday. My Monday was everyone else's Friday. And so I would, Fridays were big for the high school football show that we used to do and the high school basketball show. And then the weekend would start again. So it just went so quickly because the days just flew by because you were just so busy covering, even in the middle of summer, covering Legion baseball. So it was a 12-month-a-year thing, 5 days a week, a lot of hours, weren't paid a lot. But at the time when you're single and you're young, that's not as important. You're just doing what you love and you don't have any mouths to feed but your own. So you're just focused on the job. And it was awesome.
And then at what point did you shift into becoming sports director? You talked about how you obviously started on weekends.
Yeah, I think it was about a year and a half in. So I was around 22, 23 years old when I became sports director. So December of 21 is when I started as the weekend. And then I would say it was summer of 23 when I became the main sports director. And so then it was, Monday through Friday doing the job. So I was pretty young. And I remember taking that job thinking, I'm going to have someone working under me. I feel so young in this role. And I remember Jeff Russo just saying, look, you just have to own it. You got to be in charge and treat people well, but this is your sports department and people will respect you. And that happened. But there was always a little trepidation of being in charge of a department and helping, lay eyes on on who's going to be your weekend sports anchor and going through some tapes and helping with that because he's going to be your teammate. And so, yeah. And then it was 2 years of that, 2 years of being a sports director and being in charge of the content and being the overseer of all the content that we put on TV on the sports department side.
Do you have a favorite individual moment or story or game or something from your time as sports director that sticks out to you?
There were a couple of things that stand out when I was in Kearney. One was, every time sweeps would come around, it's like, all right, what's going to be our stories for sweeps? Sweeps meaning the big ratings periods where your advertising dollars are drawn from and try and get something really compelling for people to watch. And I remember thinking, well, are there any famous people around here? And long story short, I wound up going to Jay Novacek's ranch in Gothenburg and contacted him somehow and met him, and we went out there for half a day and interviewed him and did a story on Jay Novacek, who was a Nebraska native and he had retired already. And so that was one of those moments of like, oh my goodness, I'm interviewing a Super Bowl champion here in central Nebraska. This is pretty cool. So that would be one that stood out. And then, I came up with an idea because I was covering Nebraska, the UNK Lopers. And as I'm covering practices, I realized how much access they were allowing me to get because I'm just on the field. I'm in players' faces, getting stuff. And I remember going back to the sports department and talking to Jeff this is when I was the weekend guy and saying, hey, I think it'd be a really cool idea if we did a season-long story on this UNK football team and turn it into a, hour-long feature that we could run at the end of the year. And so we had such great access. Remember covering that they had a playoff game that year and went into the locker room. And so eventually we turned that into an hour-long show that documented the season of Nebraska Kearney football. And then getting that, we got the time slot and it aired a bunch of times, but it was in the era where if you missed it on TV, you didn't see it. There wasn't the YouTube stuff. But I remember playing it for Daryl Morris, the head coach, and his staff. Jeff and I went into the room and sat and played it for them. And I remember Daryl Morris, like tears streaming down his eyes as he's watching this thing, and the coaches were just so impressed with it. And that's kind of when you realized what you're doing can mean something if you do it the right way. And for a small community to have the local station put together something they could use in recruiting, but also showcasing and having these memories for them, that was great. And then eventually when I was sports director, I also went to contacted the UNK basketball team when Tom Kropp was the head coach, and I went on the road with them to Colorado School of Mines and I think it was Colorado Christian University out there in Colorado. I took the bus ride with them. I went out on the charter bus, went out there, got to visit my family for a couple of days because that's where they were. But I documented the trip, and we turned it into a series on NTV as well. So just the taking advantage of the local access you have and realizing you don't need to interview a Super Bowl champion or interview someone who plays for an NFL team to put together a really cool story, because you realize everyone in that community really cares about the community and those that play a part in it. And what better way than to showcase the local sports teams?
And Tom Kropp just retiring from
Yeah.
thing this year, so that's very timely.
Yeah, and I was right in the locker room with him and got to see his. Remember asking for access and tell him what we wanted to do, and I'd be in the pregame and the postgame, and just watching him how he talked to his team and how they responded to him, and then eventually they made it to the NCAA tournament, the regionals in Denver, and playing Metro State. And one of the great games I remember was the regional final to go to the Elite Eight, to go to Lakeland, Florida. They hosted Metro State at the Health and Sports Center, and Nick Savela, Nick Branting, and just this loaded team. And they're down by, I don't know, 5 or 6 late in the game. And eventually Savela hits a 3 to tie it right before the buzzer. They go to overtime and they win it. And this place is rocking. And I'm shooting the game with my camera on the baseline, have this great seat. And it was one of the greatest experiences I've had covering any sporting event there in Kearney.
Awesome. To show your range, you have the serious stuff like we were just talking about, and the really in-depth stuff there. One story that I know off the top of my head, because you were a hair before my time, was the Norman, Nebraska feature that we repurposed here just a few years ago in our 50-year anniversary of the Nebraska-Oklahoma deal. Can you tell us a little bit of what went into that story, highlighting the village, the occupied territory, whatever you want to call it, of Norman, Nebraska?
Yeah. I'll try to do my best to recall exactly how it came about. I do remember, I don't know if I drove through the town, past the town, saw the sign, or just looked at a map for a story idea. But there are so many different towns in Nebraska that you never travel to and haven't heard of, perhaps. And I knew there was a Norman, Nebraska. And so I thought, well, how silly would it be? How funny would it be if we did a story on Norman, Nebraska, and how that's where the game's going to be when Nebraska plays them? And I think this was the year when Bill Callahan took Nebraska to Oklahoma. And I think they lost 30-3. I think that was when they played this game. But leading up to that game, and I was a big Kenny Mayne fan at ESPN who did some scripted stories. And I'd always wanted to do stories like that to showcase some of my personality, but also to just make people laugh. I just really enjoy that reaction and making people feel good and joyful and have that response. And so we, I think it was Jared, our photographer at the time, I think he and I went out there, and we did not do any prep for it, meaning we didn't go there first to make sure anyone would be around. We didn't make any calls. We just showed up and started knocking on doors and to explain to people what we wanted to do. And I had a couple of scripts that I would have people read. So I had that prepared. That wasn't just off the cuff, but showed up there, knocked on doors, and hoped someone would be home. I mean, this is the middle of the afternoon. This is like 1, 2, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a weekday. And an older gentleman came out, and we told him what we wanted to do. And I don't even know if he understood it, but he's like, sure. Another guy came out and working on his truck, and we walk up to him. Hey, can you do this? And they did it. And I never went back to Norman after that. I don't know if I might have gotten a couple of emails from Norman, or people going, that was awesome, or family members who knew someone from there. But when we put this story together and we put it on air that night, again, this is, if you didn't see it the first time, you missed it. Like, this is, if you weren't sitting down and watching those 3 minutes, you never saw it again unless we re-aired it a time later. But I remember airing the story thinking this is going to be pretty funny, but I don't know what the reaction's going to be. And then we played it, and I'm sitting down on the set as it's playing, and um, Colleen is in tears. She's drying her eyes with Kleenex as we come back on the set, and Seth is laughing because no one had seen anything like who would think of something so stupid, something so silly. Like it takes a lot of thought and yet stupidity to come up with something like that. And it was so dry, and I can still quote a couple of the lines from it, but I hadn't seen it until you repurposed it. It'd been 20 years since I'd seen the story, but it resonated in such a way that I included it on my resume reel for KETV in Omaha, and I wound up doing probably 20 stories like that over my 3 to 5 years that I was in Omaha working at KETV.
It was very good, very good, and you're very good at what you do. The KETV time also then created your Omaha audience, of course, with doing the radio, with Schick and Nick show on 1620 The Zone, and all that stuff. So it just broadened your Nebraska base, I think.
Yeah, and it was such a natural step. I can remember applying for a job after I was done. My job with Kearney, I could feel was coming to an end, or I could feel God's timing was like it's time to move. But Wichita had an opening, or they were creating a sports department. Buffalo had an opening, and Jeff Russo at his station, my old sports director, he was there, and they were hiring a third guy, a reporter. I'm like, you know what, this could be good. I could go back to upstate New York and Western New York, where I used to live, and cover my favorite team, the Bills, but then Omaha came open as well, and I remember thinking, well, that would make a lot of sense, but I just didn't know if it was the right thing to do, like just stay in Nebraska, and if I needed to broaden my horizons or anything, or get something else. And so I remember them, Omaha, KETV, the news director, Roseanne Shannon, calling me and leaving a message on my answering machine, which, yes, we did have those back in Kearney back in the day. And it was like, hey, we need to hear from you. We'd love to have you. And I had already interviewed there, but wasn't sure I wanted to do it. So I'm trying to keep Omaha at bay while I keep my options open with Buffalo. And because I think Buffalo was like, I think that'd be really fun, but I didn't know what to do. And I remember on my way home from a shoot or from dinner at NTV, and I'm driving home and I'm praying, God, can you just please close a door or make it really crystal clear about what I'm supposed to do here? Because I don't really know what to do. I got a couple of pretty good options, but I'm not sure I want to go to Omaha. And I'm done with that prayer. And I'm telling you, within 10 seconds, my phone rings, and it's the Buffalo station telling me they've eliminated the position and they're not going to hire for it. And I can remember that moment thinking, okay, we're going to Omaha. I called them that day. Within a couple of days, we had a contract. And leaving NTV was one of the saddest days of my life. I was terrified of going to Omaha with a bigger audience, and you're always afraid to fail, right? They teach you don't be afraid to fail, but you are afraid. It's a good, healthy energy to have. But I was like, I love it here, but I know it's time to move. We move out there, and within a month, Tom Chattel, the local columnist, was writing a column about a story I did and how much he enjoyed it. And it was a story I did on Zach Taylor, who's the quarterback at Nebraska. And I was trying to pick up from going back to the Norman story. I was trying to come up with I wanted to do one a month, a funny story that would resonate locally and that would get some eyeballs and create a funny reaction. And I can recall reading that Zach Taylor was in his career at Wake Forest before he transferred was 1 for 1. He was a junior college after Wake Forest, but he was 1 for 1 at Wake Forest. And so I thought, well, how fun would it be to recreate that magical pass with Zach Taylor to talk about how great a quarterback he was? The problem was like the pass was like 3 yards. It was nothing, but we made it into this dramatic thing where we reenacted it. France Hardy, the wide receiver at the time, helped us reenact it. There's a punchline at the end, and I think it's online somewhere, the one perfect pass from Zach Taylor. But we did this story, and it airs that night, and Tom Chattel watched it and wrote a story on it 2 days later, a column on a Friday. And if you're getting written by Tom Chattel, you're either not doing good at your job or you're doing really good at your job. And And I give Tom to this day a lot of credit for giving me instant credibility in the market by talking about what I had done, and it just added to my confidence. It added to gave me, I guess, positive reinforcement to what I was doing, and I never looked back from that first story, and just wound up doing a bunch of them and creating a local fan base, or at least people that enjoyed watching me. I'd like to think I was somewhat memorable, but then in Omaha, it was kind of planted my flag a little bit and tried to own the market. And I'd like to think that on the sports side that I did, but it was certainly God blessed, and just one of the greatest runs that I was able to experience was at NTV and at KETV. It was from Central Nebraska to Eastern Nebraska. I couldn't have asked for anything better.
I don't want to keep it too much longer, but the last comment and the one a little bit ago about the prayer, if you're comfortable with this, do you mind sharing what your faith has meant to you in your journey from college to NTV to KETV to ESPN?
Yeah, it's been a lot. I appreciate the question. It's been, when you get into this job and you start sending out tapes, you're at the mercy of one person liking you or not liking you. It takes a leap of faith to put a VHS tape at the time in the mail and send it to a place you've never been, not knowing if you're going to like the place and not knowing if they're going to like you, not knowing if they're going to call you, but you just blanket the country with these tapes. And whether it's Kalispell, Montana, or Kennewick, Washington, you're like, oh, sure, that looks good. I have no idea how that's going to be. And things worked out in a way that cannot, for me, in my faith, has never been able to be explained by random chance. I told that story about the Buffalo thing, getting the job in Kearney, where it's 5 hours from my house. My future wife lived in Lincoln, and I had met her through Campus Crusade for Christ, summer 2000 in San Diego. So we had known each other for a while. We had been dating long distance when she was going to school at St. Cloud State in Minnesota, but her family was in Lincoln. And so we got to see each other a bunch. I could have gone anywhere. I mean, if I go to Washington, if I go to Montana, if I go to Georgia, that probably doesn't happen, those relationships. And so that the job and just going, God, I'm just going to leave it up to you. And wherever you want me, I'm ready to go. Just, I'd like it to be clear. And I only got one yes of, we'd like to hire you in the first job. And that was NTV. I got a big, this door is closed with the Buffalo station and went to Omaha. And that job opened at the perfect time. Sean McMahon was a guy, I think it was at NTV, went to KETV, kind of the same career path. And he decided to leave the business. Why? Just wanted to do something else. It was perfect timing for him, perfect timing for me. Wound up getting the job. Within 2 months, 3 months, I'm filling in on 1620 The Zone because Michael Severe, who's a legend within the state and that part, his father or father-in-law lived in St. Paul, Minnesota, and said, hey, I heard Matt Schick's coming to Omaha. He's good. I think you'd like him. So they needed a fill-in for Kevin Kugler one day, and Michael Severe calls, and he's working at KTV, obviously, so he knows who I am. So I'm a colleague of his, but he said, hey, do you want to fill in with me? And wound up doing that. And probably within a year, had an offer to do sports talk radio in Omaha at that station, turned it down because I couldn't do both jobs at once. But then that job could feel my heart just changing and just be like, I want to do something else. I take a 10% pay cut to do radio instead of TV. What person would do that? Why would someone prayerfully consider leaving TV when you probably want to keep doing television in the future, but it felt called to do something else. And then you get a sports talk radio job for 3 years. And then at the end of that job, they bring in a new general manager there who wasn't a fan of my show with Nick Baugh. We just didn't like it, wanted to create his own stamp on it. And in the midst of that, in the beginning of that radio show that Nick and I had an interview with ESPN and wound up interviewing for a job at ESPN News. Didn't get the job. not sure I really wanted the job. A lot of prayer involved in that, and where am I going to be? But I want to stay I want to stay with Nick. I want to do this show. Wound up not getting the job, and that was 3 months into the radio show. So we hosted the show for 3 more years. Eventually, we can tell it's coming to an end. They want me to host with somebody else, and I just didn't want to do it. So I reached back out to Dari Noka, who, through a mutual friend, had reached out to me the first time I'd interviewed. And when I did get the job, and I reached out to him, and I just felt on my heart, I got to reach out to him to see what's going on. And I said, Dari, do you have any ears to the ground there in Charlotte? Any openings? And he said, in fact, we are looking for somebody. And put a quick tape together, talked to my agent, and within a couple of months, I was working at ESPN in Charlotte. And it, so many things had to happen that just can't be explained by random chance, that it's reaffirmed a lot of what I've already believed. But sometimes, God waits for you to pray for him to answer, to strengthen your faith. And that's what happened in a lot of these instances. And you meet your wife, you get married, you move out here, you have kids, and you're in this great spot. And now you're working a lot, can coach your son's teams and daughter's teams in their youth sports, and still get to work for the worldwide leader. So it's been really, really good. And certainly beyond blessed. And I'll tell you one quick story. Back to my NTV days. I was traveling back from Lincoln, Nebraska to Kearney after I had been visiting my now wife, but girlfriend at the time, and spent the weekend at her family's house. And I'm traveling back in the morning, and my car gets a flat tire right short of Beaver Crossing. And I don't have a cell phone. I didn't have one. So I'm on the side of the road, and I'm just praying, God, I need some help. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I got to go to work. I'm supposed to be there at like 2:00, and it's 11:30, and I'm never going to make it. And I just stood by the car, gave one of these, like, can someone help me? I need a phone. Guy pulls up within 10 seconds, lets me into his car, takes me into Beaver Crossing. He knows a tow truck place. Like, he's, everyone knows somebody. Takes me there. They take me out to my car on the highway. We tow it back to the truck place. This guy says, the guy who gave me a ride says, I'll take you back to my house/farm. I've got a couple of extra cars that I don't use. You can use it until you don't need it, so you can get to work. Loans me the car. I'm driving this little, kind of a Miata type of older car. And he got me to work. And then within the next week, I brought it back, picked up my car, and this and that. So I say all that to say, like, God's been there a lot. And in the big times, in the little times that feel like big times, and the people of Nebraska. And a lot of times those prayers were answered by the people of Nebraska. And that's why that state will always be home.
Matt, thank you so much. That was great. The stuff that I didn't know, and I don't know if our viewers know, but I appreciate you opening up about that stuff. I think that's so important, and it's a very great portrait of what a lot of Nebraska is, trying to help other people, and also the divine intervention to make sure you got to work on that.
Yeah, no question about it. It's been a great ride, and hope this helps somebody, but Nebraska certainly helped me, and it started at NTV for sure.
Sounds good, Matt. Thank you for your time. When you come through again, maybe we'll figure out a way to have you do markets for us.
Yes. Dressed and undressed, naked heifers. I'll be there. I promise.
Matt Schick, thank you so much. Have a great day, sir. We'll have another new episode of Inside NTV coming up next week.